my 6 years at Ursuline, it has really been a good run. I've met so many friends that I know I'll have for life. The girls in my grade couldn't be nicer to each other, which is really good knowing they have your back. Now I'm going to share with you my Ursuline past. So, I remember way back in the 7th grade when I arrived at Ursuline, my big sister, Shannon Prendergrass, greeted me at the door. She took me to homeroom, and my homeroom teacher was Mrs. Anderson, and she greeted me with a huge smile. The first day wasn't so bad, but for the next 2 weeks, I went home and cried every night. Until I met Leah. We had been sitting at the same lunch table, but I never really had a conversation with her. Then, all of a sudden, one morning, we were laughing in homeroom, and the rest is history. We made up a little family. I was the dad, Leah was the mother, and Corey was the child we adopted from Africa. Lisa was the grandmother, and Christina was the grandfather, I think. Wow, that was funny. Leah was one of my best friends ever since. One thing that I remember from 7th grade is homeroom D period. I remember Leah and Christina would throw a bouncy ball to each other from across the room, and I always thought they were going to get in trouble, so I, of course, never participated. I remember the ball would go into the hallway at times, and somehow Mrs. Anderson never looked up when we all laughed. Thank God. Otherwise, we would have all been in detention. I also remember having 7 p.m. basketball games and getting Domino's or Papagino's takeout before every game. We would get fries, breadsticks, and pizza.
Oh my God.
No wonder why I was so fat back then. How did we even run up and down the court after eating that food? I'm surprised no one threw up. And who could forget Mrs. Tomasi and her infamous sweaters? My favorite one was the Scotty dog sweater. She was like the mother of the grade, and I loved her class because we never did anything. My least favorite part of 7th grade was music class, because we had to sit there and listen to Mrs. Tomasi narrate the sound of music, and she always insisted that we were further back than we said we left off the last class. On to 8th grade. I had Senora Saman in homeroom, and I immediately thought this lady was crazy. She was always putting up promiscuous music videos and speaking in Spanish. In 8th grade, my friend with Corey really began. We were in the same homeroom and sat near each other. I also remember in math class that Sister Esther moved Corey and I's seats. But because we would talk too much, she really just moved me behind Corey for a little while until she realized that didn't fix the problem. And Corey moved far away. We became even closer because we were on JV basketball as 8th graders, which was pretty big. Also, Leah, Corey, and I would go to extra help with Sister Esther almost every day, and we had a blast, and it was in this classroom. And we do problems on the board, and we get expo markers on our fingers, so we lean on the desks, and the marker would get on the desk. And Sister Esther would yell at us, but her yell wasn't scared. We thought it was funny, so we kept doing it. And we really liked to do it because we got to use the secret bathroom at the end. It was right there. And I also love Sister Esther's math class because we would pray for 20 minutes for each class and get her off topic, usually leading her to talk about her birds. On to freshman year. The first day was intimidating, but I met a lot of friends I have today on those first few days, so looking back, it was not so bad. Carlton and Danae. Being around Danae made me feel so powerful because she was so small. And when Carlton came, I was just like, who's this southern girl? However, I really remember Mr. Mayer's class. I sat next to Corey in the back. One day, Corey was called out for texting when really she was just taking notes in her lap. Poor Corey. Also, a little later in the year, Mr. Mayer handed back our in-class Romeo and Juliet essays. And Corey and I looked at each other and both had an F on the top of the page. It was not that funny at all, but for some reason we were laughing so hard we almost fell off our chairs. We figured at least we're in this together.
Oh, man.
Now sophomore year, my favorite year. I had 2 favorite classes, geometry and English class. Miss Joseph's geometry class was great. I remember I sat right in front of her desk and she accused me of staring at her, although I just told her that I was paying attention. I also remember that time we were playing lightning math in class and Corey and I were just yelling at each other going crazy, but it got real awkward when Mrs. Lightsinger came in the room and pretty much killed the fun immediately. I also remember that geometry class, which was C period, was last on Thursdays, which meant Corey and I went to the bathroom halfway through the class just to break up the time. English class with Mrs. Dempsey was one of my favorite classes of all. I remember the year got off to a rough start when she said 2 people had failed the summer reading test. Of course, it had to be Leah and I. The rest of the school year was good. I remember she Mrs. Dempsey sat me right in front of her desk, so I always could hide myself when she would play a movie so I could take a nap. My favorite story of sophomore year was one with Lisa Luciano. So we were in Mrs. Dempsey's class and I couldn't see the TV, so I wanted to go and sit somewhere else, and there was an empty desk next to Lisa. So I asked her if I could go sit next to Lisa, and she said yes, but if I hear one word out of 2 of you, I'm moving you back over here. So I said, okay, promise you won't hear anything. So it was really hot that day, and there was a fan over there. So I turned the fan to face Lisa and I, and then she heard me ask Lisa a question, which I was really just asking her the name of the movie, but she said, that's it, I told you, come back over here. So I went back over, and she yelled at Lisa for turning the fan toward herself. She said that she was being selfish. But Lisa didn't throw me under the bus, which was nice of her. On to junior year. I wasn't that afraid of junior year. I just figured I would attack it immediately. However, my favorite class was definitely Miss Chipman's. On the first day of school, she actually taught us, though. I was like, what is this? She put up simple problems on the board that none of us knew how to do, and she was like, what? I remember looking at Corey, Leah, and Caroline and Danae, saying, this lady doesn't know how stupid we are. She soon moved me and Corey to the front once she realized the back corner was the class clowns. I also remember begging Miss Chipman to let us play Just Dance, which she did, but for some reason just Olivia Hessmark participated. It was really just a plea to do nothing and just have a conversation with each other instead of doing math problems. I also remember when I sat in the front row with Leah during anatomy class. It was not a good idea. Leah would always play footsies with me or something, making me laugh. However, Mrs. Collins didn't notice it, so it was all good. Also, we would always take the elevator junior year, even after Corey's ACL was healed, and we'd see Mrs. Matthew and tell her the story, but she didn't really buy it. And finally, senior year. I really enjoyed this class in physics. This class was great. I loved our fall broadcast. I remember running down the hill and throwing leaves in our hair to make it look like leaves actually fell on us. I remember Danae coming out of the dressing room with ridiculous Halloween costumes. I also remember going to Shaw's with Danae and telling her to hold up a chicken and say it was a turkey, even though Leah and Corey were completely opposed to this idea. Also, I remember that Danae said Cool Whip and cake would make a great dessert for Christmas. Who has Cool Whip and cake for Christmas dessert? I know Leah, Corey, and I always complained about how boring physics class was, but it was a funny class too. Mrs. Schneider always said we are having a quizzy. Or one time she told Corey to not put her head over the rocket. And Corey put her head over the rocket. And luckily the rocket wasn't working, so it never hit Corey in the face. I just want to mention 2 memories I have had with Caroline and Abby. Caroline and I have so many teachers convinced that we are cousins. We actually aren't. Do you guys know how popular the name Sullivan is? Abby, remember in 9th grade when Senor Benjamin asked us when our birthdays are? I remember Kayleen raised her hand and so did Courtney, but I did not see Abby raise her hand because she sat in the back of the room. And Senor said, oh, 3 people have the same birthday. And I was shocked too, until Kayleen and Abby told me that they are twins. How did I miss that? However, I don't think Senor Benjamin ever picked up on that, even though you guys have the same last name and the same birthday. Oh yeah, Carlton. Remember when you were on the basketball team this year and you only showed up to 8 games? Yeah, I remember that. But it's okay, because you always joked about it, so I know you aren't offended. Those are just a few of the many memories I've had at Ursuline. I could go on forever, but you guys would probably get bored. Just like you probably are right now.
No.
I want to thank my family for letting me attend this school in great education Ursuline has given me. I want to thank some of my best friends, Corey, Leah, Danae, Lisa, Courtney, Jessica, Carly. Laughing every day.
Your best friends with the long list.
However, thanks to all of my acquaintances for being so pleasant over the past few years. But I want to leave you with this quote. Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. Thanks for everything, guys. I love you all and good luck in the future. I know you will all do great things.